Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Americans for Limited Government podcast. I am Frank McCaffrey. I am right here on the border with Mexico in Hidalgo, Texas. The border fence is behind me. We've got a lot going on. I'm joined by ALG President Rick Manning. And Rick, now, I just wanted to point out something here. You might notice on this border fence here that there is actually a gap, and there's other gaps here in these fences. Well, that's been the subject of a lot of jokes down here because you put up this fence and, it's however many feet high. It's got spikes on the tops. It's made of a material you can't climb. But then there's a big gap that you could probably put a train through some of the gaps that they have here. And it makes you wonder, what's the purpose of putting up a fence? Well, this is the one that was put up back in 2006 as part of the way to handle the border crisis back then. What Donald Trump is talking about doing is greatly improving these walls and closing some of these gaps and closing some of these gates. So, it would serve as a deterrent. And I believe he knows it would just serve as a deterrent. It's not
And those white and green trucks that we've seen driving behind you, what are those?
Those are Border Patrol vehicles. You see them all around here in South Texas. They work for the Department of Homeland Security. They're good paying jobs, and they're all over the place. They're searching for immigrants crossing illegally. You might see them in places that are a little bit more remote than this, and oftentimes they get shot at. Now, one of the things, when I was a reporter down here, I was often very worried because I kind of look like I don't look like I belong in this part of town. I'm a big giant white guy, so I was thinking I might be a target and I might get shot at. Fortunately for me, that never happened. But there were times when that thought crossed my mind.
Let's talk about what's happening and why you're down there at the border. We're at the border because, I think it's a great place to emphasize how important our citizenship is, because on the other side of that border, people will pay $10,000 to be able to come back to this side of the border, the side of the border Frank's on, simply so they can have a kid and gain citizenship rights for that child. That's how important being in the United States is, and being a citizen of the United States is. The rest of the world understands it. Unfortunately, we in America don't seem to understand it and appreciate it.
Rick, I have much more of an appreciation of that after working down here for a few years. I didn't really understand it years ago when we worked together. But man, I'll tell you, I've crossed over into Mexico, and you see people the way they live. They're out in the streets begging for money, pleading with you to just give them a few coins so they can survive. Oftentimes, they're telling their kids they can't go to school because they have to go out on the streets and beg for money. You see people who clearly belong in wheelchairs, but they can't afford a wheelchair. Oh, by the way, the people begging for money, pleading for money, are using old hats. And we've often commented they couldn't even afford a nice hat to hold out. They couldn't even afford a nice hat to hold out. That's the level of opportunity you see in Mexico, and it's very sad. I didn't know until I spent some time down here, and now I say, man, I'm very grateful to be in America. It's just such a great place, much opportunity.
One of the most amazing pieces of this is Mexico is every bit as rich in natural resources as Texas is. The oil fields don't stop with Texas and stop at the border. The oil fields are throughout Mexico. The fracking phenomenon that's come and really re-energized the energy industry in Texas extends into Mexico. But because Mexico nationalized their oil industry and natural gas industry, the Mexican company isn't able to extract oil. They haven't been able to innovate. They haven't been able to figure out how to actually get the oil out of the ground, particularly not the fracked oil, and they haven't invested in it. So the reality is, it's socialism. It's the government ownership of the means of production that is impoverishing those people, because Mexico could be as wealthy as Texas if they were allowed to actually get to and extract and sell their precious resources, natural resources that God has blessed their country with, but their government, their economic system stifles that and impoverishes their people. And it seems to me, Frank, that when we talk about the poverty of Mexico, the answer is not just open the border and let everybody here. It's to try to help Mexico and be able to become a wealthy country, as it should be, and become a country that its citizens are able to find high-paying jobs and become wealthy themselves and develop their own social support systems so people who can't don't get left behind.
You know, another thing, Rick, I must note is there's also a real fear in Mexico. If you go to a place like Reynosa, which is right across the border here, you'll feel in the air fear that these cartel bosses are going to do something, you know, and that they're going to somehow kidnap their children. I was once told by someone who spent some time in Reynosa that the cartel bosses say, we're going to be bringing on 20 new members from elementary school. So please round up 40 prospects. Well, why round up 40 prospects? Because when you pull the 40 kids up in front of everybody, you know, up front center stage and say, okay, who wants to join the cartel? And they all say no, then you can execute 20 of them in front of the other 20 to make the other ones so afraid that they have to sign up. I mean, that just shows you how sick the culture is in Reynosa. Right, and that's just a few miles down here. That's right behind me. You know, there's fear. There's fear in the air. People just want to know what's going to happen next. Are they going to get? Are their kids going to get kidnapped? Is their family member going to get kidnapped? Are they going to get executed? You know, it's just it's a terrible thing. Is their daughter going to be sexually assaulted? You know, it's a really horrible culture. Again, makes you very proud to be an American. Makes you very proud to be an American.
Are those the Los Zetas cartel? Isn't that the cartel that's there in that part of the woods?
Zetas are a very brutal cartel around here, and I better keep my mouth shut about that, right? I better not say that out loud. Also, there's the Gulf cartel, but also the cartels have been splintered in recent years. And an added bonus, they're starting to move into normal neighborhoods. You know, you remember 10 years ago, the image of the cartel was that they lived in these huge ranches, these mansions with beautiful cars and gold guns and beautiful women. They stopped doing that because that was a giveaway to the law enforcement community. So what they started doing is moving into regular neighborhoods and driving regular cars like mine. You know, I'm driving a Toyota Corolla these days, you know. That's the type of cars that cartel members are driving rather than Mercedes-Benz.
Essentially, they're blending into the local communities, and as a result, they are less able to be distinguished because they aren't self-segregating. And one of the great challenges is dealing with the cartels, and there's a lot of different talk about solutions. Let me just ask you the basic question.
Yeah.
We hear a lot about local Mexican officials and local Mexican police chiefs who try to take on the cartels, having a relatively short lifespan as a result of that. Is there anything that can be done from the point of view of the government of Mexico to get control of this situation, or are the cartels in control of the government of Mexico?
Well, the cartels are still in control of the government of Mexico, but what they've been doing, what I've seen them do recently, is have military and law enforcement out on the streets wearing ski masks so you can't see their identity. That makes them feel more comfortable, makes someone who wants to help out the community feel more comfortable signing up. So you can't, they wear masks to hide their identity, and they can't be identified by members of the cartels.
So to put it in perspective, Antifa here wears masks because they don't want to be able to be identified by the government here.
Correct.
Because they're engaged in anarchical activity and trying to overthrow the government. And so they don't want to have personal consequences. The KKK wore hoods because they wanted to be able to go back into their lives after burning crosses and hanging Black people, lynching Black people. They wanted to be able to go back in their lives and not have to wear that shame in the real business life that they did. But in Mexico, the law enforcement officers and the military have to wear masks because they don't want to be identified by the cartel. So the world is upside down in Mexico related to that.
In many ways, you're right. And now another aspect to that is that there is a mask culture in Mexico where masks are popularized due to lucha libre. which is professional wrestling where they all wear masks. But yes, you are correct. It's very backwards there. As opposed
Comes
to
back to professional wrestling with you, doesn't it, Frank?